I knew what I was doing was wrong. At the beginning, of course, I tried to convince myself that it was harmless. One of the most painful things to me was when my son said to me that one of the things he most respected about me was that he thought I was entirely ethical in my job. And that was, hearing him say that was very, something I don't ever want to go through again.
A 30-year federal employee, Robert Schofield, was convicted of bribery and of falsifying immigration documents for hundreds of Asian immigrants.
I look back to the very first night I was in jail, back in 2006. And I was laying in the cell the first night, and I was thinking to myself, well, 2 or 3 years, I think I can handle that. And I also thought to myself, well, what about if something would happen to my parents while I'm in here? Needless to say, when it was presented to me that the guidelines called for 18 to 22 years, and that the prosecutor sought a sentence of 25 years, I was, all of a sudden the consequences became not so clear to me.
Schofield was a trusted employee in a position of responsibility and apparently a very well-liked individual. He was commonly known as the go-to guy in his office, someone who could cut through red tape and get things done when others couldn't. Unfortunately, this good guy profile is often typical of white-collar criminals.
USCIS employee Consuelo Fletcher discovered that Robert Schofield could expedite her nephew's naturalization certificate for a price.
My nephew had an expired resident alien card through marriage, and he was under deportation, and that's when I asked Robert Schofield to help him stamp my nephew's passport in order for him to be able to work, and he was doing that approximately about 4 or 5 years. After that also, he granted approval for my nephew to become a U.S. citizen.
In certain instances, although employees observed questionable behaviors by Schofield, they chose not to question the behaviors because of his position of authority and because he had demonstrated his extensive knowledge of the immigration process.
I think other employees who may have suspected me didn't report it because what I was doing was really part of my responsibilities. Seeing that cases got completed, responding to requests for help from attorneys, from congressional offices. So it wasn't unusual for me to be involved in cases like this, or for me to request that a certificate be typed or a file be located.
I really didn't think that something was going on until probably about the last 5 years. Constant activity in his office is really not a normal day for a supervisor. And also he holds probably 2 to 3 cabinets of files. And people are constantly coming to him, asking him, and it's just too busy for a person.
A disorganized and chaotic workplace, lacking in strong checks and balances, allowed this crime to continue for more than 8 years.
because there were so many files missing in general or not easily found. When I couldn't find a file or when I didn't produce a file, people didn't question it because it was fairly routine.
It's really the agency's responsibility to establish internal controls. Upholding these controls is everyone's responsibility. Internal controls are simply the measures an agency takes to ensure that the mission is accomplished and that fraud, waste, and abuse doesn't occur in the process. Some internal controls, such as the receipt of fees and applications, are well established. Others are not as well established and need further work to ensure that guidelines are both clear and understood.
He was a supervisory adjudicator, but routinely conducted interviews of applicants and primarily interviewed applicants of one nationality. Also, when he inappropriately processed a file, he called it a rush adjudication, which hindered other employees from closely scrutinizing the file. He also routinely requested that certificates of naturalization be prepared manually, and many of the files were logged as lost files, simply because he did not make them available for office audits.
Well, there wasn't much in the way of auditing prior to even 2004. 2004, I think, is when the new system of file tracking was complete across the country. And at that point, there was much more accountability. Prior to that system, the accountability, it was easy to explain away why the file wasn't exactly where it was supposed to be. Oftentimes, you couldn't even prove what office the file was supposed to be in. It was not difficult to hide files.
It was a pattern of handwritten naturalization certificates and the fact that this activity was really outside the norm that ultimately led to Schofield's arrest. The ability to recognize when something isn't right is the first step to detecting and preventing fraud.
Recognizing these red flags can alert management and employees to potentially fraudulent behavior. Red flags unique to USCIS can include socializing with customers or suspected illegal aliens, unusual customer traffic patterns, especially when customers ask for a particular employee by name, difficulty getting or maintaining appropriate security clearances, rush jobs that require last-minute preparation of documents without the usual checks and balances, manually prepared documents as opposed to computer-prepared documents, lost files which are unavailable for audits or reviews.
Money was really the issue, the main motivating factor for me. I had some financial difficulties. I started out with small items, a few $100s for this, for that, and as it grew, as the benefits grew, so did the amount of money that was coming in. I found that once I was able to resolve my financial difficulties, I had become too conditioned to the money.
Following Schofield's arrest, many people said that they had a feeling that he might be up to something. They reported his unusual customer base, his tendency to bypass established controls, and his expensive lifestyle, a lifestyle that someone in his position simply couldn't afford. All of these indicators could be considered red flags for fraud.
Certain stressful or high-pressure situations can also be red flags for corruption. High debt or financial losses, extravagant lifestyle, gambling, drug or alcohol problems, excessive family or social expectations, breakdown in relationships resulting in divorce or child custody battles.
Empowering employees who know that something is off the norm, especially the lower level employees who may be afraid to go against the superior, who may be afraid to speak out when they really are not sure. To explain to them it's okay to bring your concerns if something is not right.
USCIS has learned some valuable lessons and instituted some strong programs to ensure the utmost integrity within the department. Jan Lane explains.
Insight is a self-assessment program that allows CIS offices to measure their compliance in a number of critical areas that present the greatest risk for employee misconduct. These areas include financial transactions, the use of purchase cards, payroll and adjudication decisions, to name a few. The second internal review area, our special review program, allows us to systematically review internal corruption matters, identified through our investigations program, through Insight, and also through field inspections. Actually, our first special review analyzed the methods that Robert Schofield used to commit his fraud. The review was very successful and resulted in a number of recommendations for improvement.
If I had had to take every case that was outside the routine to my superior, things would have been quite different.
Although this case centered around the criminal activities of an employee who accepted bribes, there are other serious and potentially criminal activities that warrant involvement by the Office of Security and Integrity, the Office of the Inspector General, or both. Soliciting or accepting bribes, theft or misuse of government funds or property, physical assault, any conduct of a sexual nature, including unwelcome sexual advances and requests for sexual favors, unauthorized release of classified information, drug use or possession in the workplace, unauthorized use of government databases, vehicles, or equipment, misuse of government travel or purchase cards, falsification of employment application documents, consumption of alcohol while on duty.
These kinds of activities can lead to disciplinary action, the loss of a security clearance, or even termination in some cases. I think it's also important for employees to know that even some misconduct outside the workplace, such as the use of illegal drugs, arrests for non-work related issues, and other activities, could also have the same consequences.
If serious or criminal misconduct is discovered, employees may find themselves facing grave consequences, such as prosecution or civil penalties.
The first thing I would say to someone else who was maybe having integrity issues would be that you're lying to yourself to think, number one, that you can get away with it. Number two, that it's okay.
Employees can feel very safe in reporting allegations of misconduct. An employee's identity is not released when they report alleged misconduct, and the employee could even remain anonymous. However, the employee should provide as much detail as possible to facilitate the efficient investigation of the allegation.
We want everyone to know that we're all responsible for maintaining effective internal controls. These controls are the very foundation of our fraud prevention efforts. In managing America's immigration system, we must remember that we hold the public's trust. It's a trust we must guard diligently and use wisely.
Well, prison at times is unbearable. It's only when you're in the situation, when you've been caught, when you've completely lost your self-respect, that you realize you didn't look at what you were doing. You didn't examine yourself and examine where this could end up.
We in the Inspector General's office are serious about our commitment to making the Department of Homeland Security and all its components accountable, responsible, and worthy of the nation's trust. We are fully committed to protecting the integrity of USCIS programs through the investigation of allegations of fraud and employee misconduct. But the success of our mission depends on your awareness and vigilance. Studies have shown that tips from employees or third parties are the #1 method of detecting crimes. We believe that empowering our employees is the best safeguard against misconduct of any kind.
The Inspector General encourages all employees to strive for these goals. Identify and recognize threats in your environment, assess vulnerabilities, and alert authorities. Detect, deter, and minimize risks in the workplace. Safeguard our employees, customers, and the American people against corruption. take the lead in stopping criminal behavior before it begins, and create a culture of respect, accountability, and teamwork.
I regret what happened, and for helping my nephew, which it has ruined my whole life. I am basically barred from getting jobs. Nobody hires me. And for something I did not gain anything for myself except to help my family. And my suggestion, don't help anybody. And if you do want to help your family, do it right.
If someone is able to look at my situation and see the possible ramifications of where they're headed, and if that can set a roadblock in their path or redirect their thinking, then it will be positive, both for the service and I guess for myself. Something good will come out of this.